Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA Insurance, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aisling O'Brien and Louise Hickey. Well, there are many farm families around the country that are still without electricity and other essential services 2 weeks on from Storm Éowyn. While ESB crews continue to work around the clock getting power supply back to homes, the frustration and difficulty of being without electricity is really starting to become obvious, including for farmers and their families. Aisling, can you take us up to speed on the ways in which the fallout from the storm is continuing to impact people?
That's for sure, Charles, because Storm Éowyn is still making its presence felt long after it has left our shores. The latest update that we have from ESB Networks at the time we're recording is around 13,000 homes, farms and businesses remain without power after the storm, which of course brought hurricane force winds and set new wind speed records for this country. And it all resulted in unprecedented damage to the electricity network. Now, the ESB said that power has been restored to over 750,000 customers following the storm, and that intensive work is continuing. They said that all available ESB networks, crews and resources, partner contractors and international support are mobilised to restore power to all customers as soon as possible. And they said they were working towards restoring the majority of those customers over the coming days. But they did say that in areas with the largest number of faults, some customers may see their estimated restoration times change, which of course can be incredibly frustrating for people who have been without power for a very extended period of time already. And in some cases, they might not get their power back until into the weekend. Now, we did learn that technicians from Austria, Finland, France, the UK, Germany and Norway are all on the ground in the areas worst affected at the moment. And they're supporting over 2,500 hardworking local crews and partner contractors who've been joined by colleagues from the south and east of the country, as well as skilled retirees as well, we're being told. And over 1,300 support staff are also involved in overseeing damage assessment, emergency call management, logistics and network operations. And the ESB said where people can and that they have power to do so, they can check the Power Check website where the estimated restoration times will continue to be updated. Now, in some instances, they said the customers whose power has been reconnected may have to be disconnected again for short periods of time to allow their neighbours to be reconnected. That's to ensure safety for those working on those power lines as well. But as you said, Charles, it has been a very trying start to the year for many people in rural areas. Farmers, their neighbours, people without heat, without power, elderly people in isolated areas. You've got people who are obviously calving at the moment. It has been very, very difficult out there for a lot of people. So we hope that the worst of it might be over by this weekend and we'll see a lot of those 13,000 people having their power restored very soon.
And Aisling, there's been a lot of discussion around the damage caused to forestry, and a new task force met for the first time this week on that. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, of course, we've seen pictures from across the country of damage to plantations. It just looked like Éowyn just flattened plantations in places, Charles. And of course, there has been huge damage caused by forestry and trees to electricity wires as well, which has compounded the job for ESB network crews and all those partner organisations that have been involved as well. But as you said, a new task force this week met for the first time. It's called the Forest Wind Blow Task Force, and it met on Tuesday to coordinate a response to ensure that storm-damaged forests are going to be managed safely and appropriately. Now, Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden and Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture with responsibility for forestry, Michael Healy-Rae, invited the stakeholders to come together on this task force to assess the damage and to come up with a plan following both Storm Dara and Storm Éowyn and the damage that both of those storms have caused. Now, Minister Healy-Rae said at this early stage, they're getting to grips with the scale of the damage on the ground, and it appears that weather affected a very large area of forest, is how he put it. And the group of stakeholders included forestry owners, forestry companies, Teagasc, Caoilte, and they're all going to plan around the prioritisation of felling licences in respect of storm damage and examine issues that arise in relation to the harvesting, haulage and sawmilling of blown down trees as well. Now, Michael Healy-Rae said that the discussions at the task force meeting were wide-ranging, and they included the potential for speeding up that licensing process for capacity in the sector to harvest this material, and the markets, of course, as well for this timber. And the task force is due to meet again next week. And this week as well, Minister Healy-Rae was out on the ground in County Meath. He visited a family farm to see the devastation caused by Storm Éowyn to forestry, and he pledged to do what we can to help landowners. And he said the task force will inform any necessary steps. And the Department of Agriculture as well, Charles, has published a wind blow and storm damage guidance for forestry owners, where an interactive forest planning model software has been developed to allow growers to input variables related to various scenarios that might be applicable to their plantations. So that is something to check out as well if you have been impacted in that way. Now, just before we leave that, Charles, as well, just switching over to the horticulture sector, there's been multiple calls on the government to provide urgent financial supports to that sector in the wake of Storm Éowyn. TDs and senators said that growers have incurred crippling losses, which includes extensive damage to polytunnels, glass houses, crops and equipment as well. And that's all coming at a crucial time in the planting season for growers as well, in a sector that supports over 7,000 jobs. Now, Fine Gael TD Joe Cooney said this week that Minister Michael Healy-Rae, who has responsibility for horticulture, is engaging with Teagasc and other stakeholders on the impact of the storm on the sector. And the TD said that Minister Healy-Rae has confirmed to him that his officials are assessing the extent and significance of the damage caused. And it's understood that the minister is set to meet with representatives of horticultural subsectors at a meeting of the Horticulture Industry Forum, which is due to take place on February 11th as well.
And as the Dáil resumed this week, Aisling, after a controversial 2-week break, the impact of the storm was a hot topic, wasn't it?
Yes, Charles, that's for sure. I mean, that break was quite controversial. The opposition were not in favour of it. Of course, the government arguing that the new ministers needed time to get up to speed on their new briefs. But I suppose given the extent of the damage caused by Storm Éowyn, maybe the optics weren't that great for TDs not to be in the Dáil. But as you said, the Dáil did resume this week, and Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden was responding to many questions about storm damage and the impact on the agriculture sector. And he recognised the significant help that farmers have provided in their local communities, despite, of course, the challenges, as we said just a bit earlier, that they're facing on their own farms at a very busy time as well. And he urged farmers to put their safety first. And he said, given all of the challenges facing them when carrying out repairs and removing fallen trees in the aftermath of this storm, he asked them to properly assess the risks of the work that they were undertaking and to keep themselves safe, which is the most important thing, of course. And when it came to storm damage on farms and on agricultural properties, here is what he had to say.
The severe storm has resulted in significant damage to protected structures, particularly in the horticulture sector, in sheds on farms, and there has been extensive damage to trees, both on farms and in forestry plantations as well. So, I just would like to put on the record as well to urge farmers that to put their safety first in terms of all of the challenges that when they're facing them, carrying out repairs, removing fallen trees in the aftermath of Storm Éowyn, to properly assess the risks of the work they're undertaking and to keep themselves safe. I am aware of reports of significant damage in the horticulture sector. As I said, my officials are engaging with Teagasc and other stakeholders to assess the extent and significance of the damage caused.
Now, also speaking in the Dáil this week was Independent Ireland TD Michael Fitzmaurice, who described the devastation which the storm had wrought on families around the country, but particularly in the West, the Northwest and the Midlands region. Now, the Roscommon Galway TD criticised the government response to Storm Éowyn, but he did praise the community response from contractors and farmers who he said went out with their tractors and their loaders to clear roads. And when it came to the damage caused by the storm, he had a clear message for government.
In the line of the farmers, we need to make sure the sheds that have been taken away, sheds have just disappeared in places. And yes, the horticulture sector as well, but those sheds, funding needs to be given away. Not task forces, not reviews. Farmers, communities, tiny towns that is to take up debris, councils, communities, and people that had to pay extra money for food. needs pounds, shillings and pence. Not a review, not a task force, not something down the road. Because this work has to start now. There are cattle in sheds that don't have a roof over their head. There are cows going to be soon calving where the calf shed is gone. This is where we need action.
Now, Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice Charles also questioned how the management of forests may have contributed to the fallout from the storm and said that corridors need to be provided in relation to forestry. And he also referenced inspections, farm inspections, and he said they should be suspended for 1 month. Of course, we did hear last week from Minister for Agriculture Martin Hayden, who said that inspectors will carry out farm inspections on a case-by-case basis following the storm. But Deputy Fitzmaurice said that farmers kind of wanted a bit more certainty around that. And he said when it came to acres, fences have been damaged maybe. And he said that inspections under that scheme should be abandoned for the next 3 months, in his opinion. Now, elsewhere, the Irish Creamery Milk Suppliers Association has called on the revenue commissioners to allow farmers to claim VAT back on diesel generators because of obviously the electricity issues that we have seen from Storm Éowyn and the fact that generators have been a lifeline and very, very important on many farms, particularly, of course, dairy farms. And the chair of the ICMSA Farm Business Committee, Pat O'Brien, has also appealed to the Department of Agriculture to allow generators be covered under TAMS as well. So we'll see what, if anything, comes from those.
Moving on now, and last week, Agriland's beef specialist, Breffney O'Brien, wrote about the livestock transport vessel MV Alondra, which it was hoped would transport 5,000 calves per voyage directly to the Netherlands for the veal industry there. It was envisaged that the ship would make 10 trips to the Netherlands, which would provide an outlet for around 50,000 calves. But now, Aisling, it appears that these hopes for this ship as an additional outlet for calves from Ireland may be dashed. What's the latest on this?
Now, Charles, as you said, it was envisaged that the MV Alondra would make 10 voyages directly to the Netherlands with calves this year, which each consignment bringing calves for an agreed number of Dutch customers. Now, sources have told Agriland that Irish calf exporters had until the end of January to come to an arrangement with the owners of the vessel and the Dutch veal industry to transport calves on the vessel. But it is understood that that deadline passed without any agreement. And as we know, currently the arrangement here in Ireland is that calves are transported over to the continent on livestock road vehicles and commercial ferries destined for the port of Cherbourg in France. And that's often referred to as roll on, roll off, that mode of transport. But we understand that without agreement now from the main calf exporters in Ireland to use this vessel, it will now not transport calves from Ireland to the Netherlands this year. And instead, we are hearing that the ship is going to be used to transport a variety of livestock to locations in Spain and in North Africa as well. And it's actually going to be based out of Foynesport in Limerick rather than Waterford as well. Now, the ICMSA President Dennis Drennan has been reacting to this development. It was something that Dennis Drennan alluded to at the ICMSA AGM last year about this boat, and I think they had high hopes for this boat and this option for calf exporters as well. And Dennis Drennan said it was disappointing that the major calf exporters did not commit to utilise the ship, which he said would have provided an additional transport option for this year. And he urged exporters to engage further with the owners of the ship to ensure that this opportunity is not lost. And he said that the ship itself looks very impressive and the general conditions and facilities that they saw when they inspected it were as good as any they had ever seen. And you can check out, we have photos. Breffney O'Brien, as he said, did write about this boat, and we have photos on Agriland. You can have a look at the interior of it for yourself as well on our website and app. And Dennis Drennan said that, look, with the shipment of live animals at record levels in 2024, he does believe that shippers should be exploring all transport options. And again, he has urged them to immediately engage and to utilise this ship going forward. So we'll have to see where it goes. But as you said, as it stands right now, as we're recording, it seems that it is in serious doubt that the MV Alondra will be bringing calves directly from Ireland to the Netherlands this year.
We're going to move on to agribusiness now. And Aisling, we learned just today, Thursday, that the long-time CEO of Aurivo Co-op is going to step down next year. What are the details on this?
Yeah, confirmation today from the dairy processor that its chief executive, Donal Tierney, is due to retire from that position next year. We were told that Donal Tierney's retirement will take effect at the Aurivo annual general meeting in May 2026. And it'll actually mark the end of his 15-year term with the co-op, which includes 6 years in the leadership role as chief executive. Now, Donal Tierney said that it has been an extraordinary privilege to lead Aurivo and to work with talented and committed individuals. And he said he will remain obviously CEO for the coming months, and he'll also prepare for the next chapter of his life after Aurivo. But he said he was deeply proud of what he's achieved in his time, and he looked forward to watching the co-op continuing to thrive. Now, the chair of Aurivo, Raymond Barlow, thanked Donal Tierney for his leadership of the co-op since 2020, and he pointed out some notable highlights during his tenure, including the acquisition and the integration of the liquid milk and van sales business of Arabon, which of course was given the green light by the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the CCPC, back in September 2023. And Barlow also highlighted the 5-year €70 million investment programme across the co-op, and he praised Donal Tierney for his leadership of the business through the challenging trading conditions that were brought about as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Charles, it's a long goodbye of sorts for Donal Tierney from Aurivo. And of course, attention is now going to turn to his replacement, as these things often do. And over the coming year, we're being told that the board of Aurivo is going to initiate a comprehensive search process to appoint a new chief executive. So watch this space, as they say.
And just before we move on from the dairy sector, we had updates this week on dairy markets as a possible indicator of where milk prices might be expected to go. On Tuesday, the Global Dairy Trade GDT index recorded a strong increase of 3.7%. The index figure of 1,264 is now at its highest level since July of 2022. And yesterday, on Wednesday, Arnua confirmed that its purchase price index, its PPI, for the month of January is 161.9. Arnua said that index figure implies an indicative return of 48.3 cent per litre, including VAT, for standard constituents. This is an increase on the 47.6 cent per litre figure for December's PPI. But moving on now, and the beleaguered revisions to the ICBF's Eurostar evaluations are still generating considerable concern from breed societies. For a while there, this issue receded somewhat from the agri-news cycle, but Aisling, it's back now. Can you tell us why?
Yes, Charles, back with a bang, it has to be said, because the Eurostar indices, these figures and star ratings, they're generated by the ICBF, the Irish Cattle Breeding Federation. And as you said, back in November 2023, there was a revision issued by the ICBF of the terminal and replacement breeding indices for beef animals. Now, that actually caused a significant backlash at the time from a number of cattle breeders who said they were negatively impacted by those changes. And in December of 2023, ICBF confirmed that it would convene a beef industry stakeholder forum on the changes to those indices for beef animals. But fast forward to more recent weeks, and what we've learned is that the Irish Cemental Cattle Society, the Irish Sailors Cattle Society, and the Irish Charolais Cattle Society have all voted to remove the ICBF indices from their respective society cattle sale catalogues. The Irish Partenay Cattle Society has also taken a decision at its Breed Council meeting to not publish any of the revised ICBF Eurostar indices for pedigree animals going forward. And the Irish Blonde Aquitaine Cattle Society has also issued a statement to us saying that it is supporting the other cattle breed societies' vote of no confidence in the Eurostar indices. Now, this week came further news that the South East Limousine Club voted no confidence in the figures following an emergency meeting on Tuesday. And the Irish Dexter Cattle Society has described the new system as a one-size-fits-all yo-yo algorithm. And it said that it is nowhere near ready for prime time. And following a meeting of that society this week, it stated that a dry run of the change was not completed and that it was not peer-reviewed. And it said said leaving breeders with no choice other than to make decisions based on star ratings means that this reservoir of genetics will be rapidly depleted. And the society said it's in the business of preserving a native Irish rare breed. And it said this scheme can undo over 100 years of preservation work in a few short years and do irreparable damage to native Irish breeds. Now, the Irish Limousin Cattle Society is due to meet today, Charles. As we're recording, we haven't any update on what their position will be to discuss this matter, and the North East Limousin Club will meet next week as well. But I imagine that there'll be a lot more to come in this row yet, Charles, so stay tuned to Agriland for more as we get it.
And just before we move on from matters relating to breeding, there was a big development this week involving the main companies in the artificial insemination sector. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Aisling?
Yeah, this is a very interesting story, Charles. So when we hear AI nowadays, we have to do a double take, don't we? Because if it's artificial intelligence or artificial insemination, and in this case, it is the latter. So the 4 of the largest operators in Ireland's bovine AI sector have confirmed that they intend to introduce intellectual property rights on their high genetic merit bulls and semen. Why? Well, they're telling us that it's all in a bid to safeguard the Irish genetics industry and to retain control of that industry in Irish farmers' hands. Now, the 4 companies, Dovea Genetics, Eurogene, Munster Bovine and Progressive Genetics, came together to issue this statement this week, and they outlined what their intentions are, and they said they want to maintain and grow the position that Irish genetics has gained as a global leader in cattle breeding. They want to safeguard the investments made in Irish breeding programs both domestically and in exported genetics. And finally, they want to preserve collaborative industry infrastructure where all stakeholders continue to work to the benefit of farmers. Now, the AI companies have said that the introduction of IP rights on elite Irish bovine genetics is actually in line with international best practice, Charles. And over the past decade, almost all of the large international AI companies have introduced these sort of protections on their genetics. But Irish genetics are currently highly accessible actually by large international players who could potentially, and I say potentially, gain control of Irish genetics by buying progeny from Irish bulls. Therefore, the companies said that we need to get ahead of this risk and stop our top genetics from immigrating to global commercial firms where they could become inaccessible to Irish farmers. So what will this all entail? What does it mean for farmers, most importantly? So the statement explained that the introduction of IP rights on some high genetic merit bulls and semen is a preventative measure which would restrict these large international players from accessing Irish genetics. And they said it will not affect any farmers' commercial sales, including farm-to-farm sales, mart sales, factory sales, or the sale of natural service stock bulls as well. So the move only relates to the sale of elite animals to other AI companies, and it seeks to protect our domestic elite bulls from being put into stud internationally and causing what the companies described as a genetic drain from the Irish sector as well. So they are proposing to establish a cross-licensing arrangement as well for domestic AI organisations to ensure that the industry retains genetic diversity, genetic gain and competition for bulls within the domestic market. So that is the AI news, not artificial intelligence, artificial insemination for you this week, Charles.
Finally this week, the speed limit on many rural local roads in Ireland will drop from tomorrow, in a move that has sparked some controversy and unhappiness. Louise, can you take us through the main details of this?
So what we will see from tomorrow is changes to that well-known striped speed limit sign. It is used as an alternative to numeric signs on specific single-lane rural roads, and we will also now see a maximum 60 km/h limit in force. Future implementation phases for speed limit reductions will focus on the speed limit in urban cores, which include built-up areas as well as housing estates and town centres, reducing to 30 km/h. The speed limit on national secondary roads is also recommended to reduce from 100 km/h to 80 km/h. The Department of Transport has been working with An Garda Síochána to ensure they are ready to implement the new limit. Chief Superintendent Jane Humphreys in the National Garda Roads Policing Bureau said An Garda Síochána will be utilising the network of roads policing and frontline resources and technology to enforce the new speed limits. Gardaí will also be deploying new mobile safety vans as required to enforce the new limits. The structure of speed limit law in Ireland is that national legislation sets default speed limits for different classes of roads. The setting of such limits is a devolved responsibility of local government, and recent legislation has not changed this structure or affected the capacity of local authorities to vary special speed limits. So each local authority has been asked to carry out a review in accordance with these updated guidelines in advance of the commencement of the speed limits coming into place. So it does mean that some of the roads will stay at 80 kilometres per hour or a different variant speed depending on what the local authority considers that's best suited.
Thanks, Louise. Well, that's almost all we have time for today. Just before we go, Agriland has been recently covering the elections for the Seanad, including the Agricultural Panel, one of the 5 vocational panels that elects members of the Seanad. The 11 members of the Agricultural Panel are now all known, so you can check out the article by Agriland editor Stella Meehan to familiarise yourself with those members of the new Seanad. And staying with elections, the race to become the next president of Macra is heating up. A number of Macra members have put their names forward now to take over from current President Elaine Houlihan, whose term ends in the next couple of months. Again, if you want to familiarise yourself with those names and keep a track of the Macra election in the coming months, stay tuned to Agriland. But that's where we'll leave it. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Louise and myself, all the best.